The time is at hand.
The elusive dog-like creature attacks livestock, bleeding them dry of blood.
8 to 10 feet tall, shadowy aliens.
But I am telling you right now,
we need a great reset.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen.
Welcome to In Dark Places, as seen on Fox Nation. Funny story. We were walking around at the Mothman Festival doing our creepy Man in Black thing, and out of the crowd pops Abby Hornicek from Fox Nation. She had her cameraman and her producer with her, and she asked if she could ask us a few questions for her show. Caught us totally off guard, but it was fun. Shout out Abby. I don't know, how about the Mothman Festival? Did you go to that? It was, like last year, too crowded to have fun. We got there at like 10 o'clock thinking that we could beat the crowd, but the crowd was already there. We met a few cool people and took a lot of pictures. And there was only like 3 people that said we were the Blues Brothers. So that's an improvement. We left at like 11:30. It was too hot and too crowded. But we got us some good island noodles. Have you had island noodles? Those things are great. I look forward to the island noodles every year. Speaking of flying insects, do you have a problem with yellow jackets where you live? These things are taking over here. It's like thousands of them out in the yard. You can't mow the grass or anything. Just constantly flying around on your feet mostly. And then they get kind of mad and get up in your face too. I don't know what the deal is. Is it something that Bill Gates has released or something? Their excuse is that it was a hot, dry summer, so the yellow jackets are bad. But it wasn't any hotter or drier than it usually is. And there's never that many yellow jackets. So I'm a little suspicious of this. So far we haven't been stung. Well, I guess bit. Those things bite you. There are a few of my friends at work and stuff. They've been bit by these things, and they said that it's a lot worse than normal yellow jackets. So I don't know. I don't trust it. Something's up. This week on the show, we have a triple threat. UFOs, aliens, and implants. Is there a connection? Well, duh. I used to know a guy that was an abductee, and I've talked about him a couple of times on the show. And I don't want to give his real name because he's kind of weird like that. He was a former Marine. His dad worked at NASA, he thinks. He was really secretive about where he worked, and he put 2 and 2 together and thinks that his dad worked at NASA for some reason. And his dad was also killed because of his knowledge. And the guy in question was often abducted as a kid. He found claw marks on the floor of his hardwood house where his mom lives, thinking that that's where he clawed the floor trying to get away from the aliens when they were taking him. And he had implants removed. He had these weird fibers that appeared on his hand after he had an implant removed. It looked like fishing line. He sent me pictures, and I have those pictures somewhere on that other episode that I was talking about him on. I don't remember which episode it was, but I'll try to find that and attach that. One day my friend Tracy Austin was doing a show about abductees. And check out the Tracy Austin show over on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Shout out Tracy. But she was doing a show on abductees, and I messaged him and told him, like, hey dude, check it out, Tracy's doing a show about abductees. You should go on there and tell her your story. That would be awesome. And he got insanely mad. And I think that's probably why we're no longer friends. But he said, my wife doesn't want me telling this stuff to the world like this. I can't be telling everybody. And you're going to get me divorced. How could you do this to me? And I was like, dude, it was just a suggestion. I wanted you to go tell your story to Tracy. I didn't set up any kind of appointments or anything. It's your decision. You could if you want. But things got weird after that, yeah. And it just further leads to evidence that people just don't get me. In 1966, Frank Earp. Wonder if he's related to Wyatt Earp. Had a terrifying encounter near Nottingham, England. He was 15 at the time and playing with two friends beside a disused canal. He admits that they were looking for a UFO. As darkness came, a mist began to rise from the watercourse. This was not unusual, but then a cloud the size of a fairground Dodgem car detached itself in the shape of a donut without a central hole. It drifted toward them. Becoming disturbed, they set off for home, quickly breaking into a trot as the apparently intelligent cloud pursued them. They could all see it, glowing inside with a strange luminescence. As they approached the edge of the village, they decided to stop. Frank was delegated to confront the intruder, for they were now close enough to home and could escape should anything go wrong. Frank turned to find the cloud just 20 feet away. He tried to ask if it was a friend or a foe, but the words were cut short by one of his friends, clearly terrified, tapping his shoulder and urging, "When I say run, run." He looked ahead into the gloom and understood the reason for this fear. For there stood a 6-foot-tall, furry figure, silhouetted in front of the glowing object. In claw-like hands, it gripped two red, pencil-shaped objects, and its legs faded into nothingness. The third boy stood only inches from the creature. As the other two fled, he called after them, bemused. It later transpired that, although he was almost touching the figure, he had not seen it, but he had seen the cloud. So these kids were looking for a UFO, and they found it. Kind of like they summoned it. That's how our friend Chris Bledsoe does. He just gets out in his yard and just kind of tells the UFOs to show themselves, and they do. Freaky. At Carrow Mill, Oldham, England, on October 8, 1972, John Byrne, a security guard at the Ferranti Engineering Works, saw a massive UFO hovering above him. It emitted a strange blue light and a high-pitched humming whine, but his fellow guard, just yards away, saw and heard absolutely nothing, just as Frank Earp's friend did not see the furry creature. In 1993, I was a bodybuilder. One December day, for no reason, my right foot hurt when I lifted weight. I was properly clothed for a workout, including my shoes. It had never happened before, but my doctor sent me to a podiatrist. The x-ray showed something was in my foot, buried deep in the muscle. He had to numb it and remove it surgically. It was a small metal object. He sent it to be analyzed because he looked at it under a microscope, and his puzzlement kind of made an impression on me. But I never heard back from his office, and when I called them, it was as if they had never seen or heard of me. I never forgot that. Till this day, I find it very disturbing. When I was in my 30s, my early childhood best friend called me and told me that the dentist found a metal rod below his teeth, and they told him they had no idea how it could have gotten there. I found it odd that he didn't seem alarmed by this. I have an implant. It's in my foot. It's made of metal. I know because it's magnetic. I'm pretty sure that my original implant was in my head, via my nose. My childhood was filled with several years of horrific nosebleeds and unexplained illnesses, both of which ended when a mysterious thing turned up in my foot. Sorry, I don't have any information about it, but as a child, I always knew I wasn't supposed to tell anyone, and I never did. I'm terminally ill now, so it doesn't matter anymore. I suspect they will be taking it back soon. I am an experiencer. that has had many abductions. Something that makes me think I have at least one implant is that with shorts and barefoot, when I go through the airport scanner, I will get an alert in the same area. If I have shorts on and am barefoot, they don't check with their hands. But if I wear pants, they will, and always find nothing. So I wonder about that. I also have a lot of bone spurs all over my body, in strange places, like my nose. I have them show up in my sacral, hips area. I have a round, hard bump in the middle of my forehead, which could be anything. I've had my doctor feel of some of them, and she said maybe I'm just bumpy. I had a cut one morning when I was around 5 on the back of my head. It is so pointy back there. Could be nothing. I sometimes wonder if the implants aren't as benign as they think. Similar to how a great percentage of people are not allergic to titanium, but it's not zero. I also think about the amount of parents who feel clinicians don't listen to their concerns and look for horses instead of zebras and all that, and think maybe there are more people who are sensitive to titanium than they think they are, because they just aren't looking at it as a problem, because they are convinced that practically everyone's body accepts titanium. So maybe it's possible they're beings, in this case, mantids. They sometimes give off arrogant doctor vibes, in my opinion. My main contact, a mantid type, once indicated to me that they use implants for biometrics, hormonal and neurochemical regulation, and an added layer of certainty for tracking in case the usual methods aren't working. They're designed in such a way that they aren't rejected by the body, because the body recognizes the implant as part of itself. Usually they aren't needed for telepathic connection or things like that, but they help provide an additional focal point in case something goes awry. A month or so ago, I was sitting at my desk at work and realized I had a perfectly rectangular indent in the meaty part of my left hand between the bone that goes to my index finger and the bone that goes to my thumb. It looked like a scar and stayed like that throughout the day, but eventually it faded away. Not sure what that was, but pretty sure I got it, most likely either by an alphabet agency or an alien. I dug an alien implant out of my right arm. It was clear, perfectly round, and hard like glass, and I dropped it because I was soapy from my shower. It was in the upper side of my right arm. Shortly thereafter, I developed a weird-looking bump on the forearm of my left arm, 4 inches below my wrist. It gets super red and throbs when they are around. Honestly, it's kind of like a cool souvenir. I don't know if I'd have the heart to remove it because it feels like the celestial version of a baby monitor. Yours truly being the baby. I might just try and have my doctor x-ray it. A dermatologist told me that it was a bug bite that didn't heal properly, but I would remember having a bug bite smack in the middle of my forearm that wasn't healing. Plus, you can feel something hard directly underneath the skin. And everything I can find on bug bites not healing warn of potentially dangerous infection being the cause, and this thing morphed from a weird-looking wound that appears to be a cyst just under the top layer of dermis, causing it to appear as a red bump. Lastly, why on earth would a bug bite or cyst throb while I'm interacting with UFOs and losing chunks of time? This is a story by Sam Wise Poe. My family is so dysfunctional they don't even care they've been abducted by aliens. I started this account to share some of my weirder experiences in life, but then I got stumped with how to even explain my family background. First off, they're highly dysfunctional. Freud would love them. Second, nearly all of them have seen UFOs, going back to my great-grandfather, who was an Air Force pilot in World War I and World War II. Not a dude with fantastical beliefs apart from Catholicism. He was salt of the earth, and he didn't care what anyone thought. And that sums up all the men in the family. My grandfather was in the Navy, World War II. Never talked about his experiences, except when a news report would come on, and the announcer would be like, "Do UFOs exist?" And he would shout, "They exist." Not a real communicative man, otherwise. My father was in the Army, lied about his age, and enlisted in World War II. Adamant that UFOs existed and the Devil's Tower formation was a base. My uncle was in the Air Force, an Air Force traffic controller in the 1960s to 70s, and said there were so many UFO sightings his superiors ordered them to stop filing reports because they were drowning in paperwork. Another uncle and my aunt encountered an orb while driving. It followed them for miles. They experienced missing time. Nobody acted like that was remarkable. My mom and dad have even stranger stories. If you bring up a UFO story at Thanksgiving, they won't be impressed. They have better UFO stories. They treat Close Encounters of the Third Kind like it's a documentary. There's more, but basically when Whitley Strieber's book came out in the 1980s, it was no big deal to my family. My mom and aunts had a whole conversation in front of us kids that, yeah, we had probably all been abducted. We had symptoms that matched the checklist. They were blasé about the fact. They might have been abducted too. I'm in the minority for finding it strange and freaky. I'm the only skeptic. I've resisted for years, thinking I was an abductee or experiencer. I'm still hoping for another explanation. They think I'm weird. My plan has been to share some of my close encounter experiences as a way of making peace with my X-Files type childhood. Hopefully it resonates with people who've been carrying the burden of being abducted. Just so you know where I'm coming from, I don't think these are the cool, cuddly ETs that Hollywood set us up to expect. Missing time, 1988, spring, 10 years old. My mom and I lived in the suburbs of a Midwestern city. It had a military Air Force base nearby. The very night we moved into the house, we shared the same abduction dream. I came home from school a little earlier than usual. Don't recall the reason. I was a latchkey kid. My mom was at work and would not get home until 6 p.m. I remember being enthusiastic at having a little extra free time at home. Any extra time spent not in school was a bonus. Before I could plan what to do, watch TV, fix a snack, 2 snacks, I felt unaccountably sleepy. Like I might collapse in the hallway. It wasn't like me. Normally, it took me hours to fall asleep. Dragging myself into the bedroom, I glanced at the clock. It was 3 p.m. I lay down on my bed and I closed my eyes and reached behind me to pull the blanket over because I felt suddenly cold. I had my hand on the blanket, gripping the edge, closed my eyes, and then I heard the sound of a key in the back door. Footsteps, rustling, grocery bags, all the familiar sounds of my mom coming home. But that didn't make sense. Why would she be home 3 hours early? I opened my eyes and saw that I was not exactly in the same position. My hand was flung behind me as I lifted it, only it was on top of the blanket, not gripping it. I stood up, wanting to ask my mom why she was home so early, and then I glanced at the clock. 6 p.m. In shock, I stood there, staring at the clock, unable to believe it. There was no way that 3 hours had passed in the blink of an eye. I hadn't even fallen asleep. My mother came into the bedroom, worried when I didn't answer her greeting. I was shaking and confused. I asked her what time it was. She confirmed it was 6 o'clock and couldn't understand my distress. When I told her 3 hours were missing and all I had done was blink, she shrugged and said, "Probably you were abducted by aliens, honey." That's it. No words of comfort, no hugs. She had absolutely no doubt that I had been abducted. But oh well, abductions happen. The Implant, 1988, summer, 10 years old. This took place perhaps a month or so after the missing time incident. At that age, I was outside riding my bike around the neighborhood. I was a tomboy, trained in gymnastics and yoga, and a big fan of recreating stunts I saw on shows like The Rockford Files or The A-Team. I regularly rode my bike into a gravel pit and did stunts there, learning how to flip the bike, drop and roll, etc. After a day of stunts, I sat on my bed and changed my clothes because we were having supper at the neighbor's house. My mom had scolded me for not wearing sunscreen, so in a pointless after-the-fact gesture, I rubbed sunscreen on my arms. That's when I noticed a strange bump beneath the skin of my left bicep. My skin is pale and translucent, so I could see there was something bluish and dark underneath. I pressed on it and could definitely feel a hard object. With tweezers, I squeezed the skin and up popped a dark grayish cylindrical object. That freaked me out. I wondered if it was a piece of gravel that somehow got embedded when I was playing, but I had only done that recently. Not enough time for skin to grow over top of it. Besides, I probably would have felt pain if a tiny pebble got lodged in my arm. I tugged it out with the tweezers, and it was attached to me by a tiny umbilical cord. There was a perfectly round, small opening in my skin, just wide enough for the cylindrical object. No blood, no pain. Now I thought it was maybe something super gross, like an insect egg. I pulled about 1 inch of the umbilical, thin, white, almost papery, out of my arm. I felt pressure in the muscle of my arm, like it was anchored there. It snapped in half, leaving part of it dangling from the cylinder. The part that was still anchored in my arm retracted. The hole closed over it, leaving no visible mark. Believe me, I spent time looking for it. To say I was freaked out is an understatement. Here's the thing. I was prepared for it to be any gross thing, just so long as it wasn't made of metal. Not sure why that I felt fear, but it influenced what I did next. I was a science geek and had a microscope. The first thing I wanted to do was take a close look at it. But I spent several minutes testing if it was rock, organic matter, or metal. I compared the sound it made when dropped on a metal plate or other objects. It sounded like metal on metal, but I didn't want that to be true. So I went back to my theory it was something organic. If it was, I could smash it flat and put it on a slide under the microscope. Why did I want to smash it? I don't know, but the urge.
Urge. I've got the urge.
She's got the urge to verbal.
I love that. It was intense. I pressed on it with the flat end of the tweezers, standing up and really applying pressure. It shot out and dropped to the floor by my bedside table. The carpet was an ugly green and gray shag carpet. I looked for several minutes with a magnifying glass, but then I had to leave the house with my mom. I told my mom about it, and she said it was probably an implant left by the aliens. Implant details. This is a detailed description of the alien implant I found as a child. I have a photographic memory, but never took pictures or made sketches at the time. Size, approximately 0.75 centimeters in length, 0.25 centimeters wide. Shape, oblong, cylinder, round at both ends, not a perfect shape, more like a kidney bean molded out of metal. A melted look to it. Weight, unknown, but oddly heavy for its size. Color, dull dark gray with slight grayish tint. Texture, smooth but with slight imperfections. Features, umbilical, white flesh like thread. Like how my one friend had that weird fishing line stuff hanging out of his hand. Freaky. Attached to the object in unknown manner. Easily pulled off, no openings on the object, visible to the naked eye. Slight indent and seam in the middle. Magnetism, not obviously magnetic, but never bounced when dropped on a metal surface. Acoustics, it made a pronounced clank when struck with metal tweezers. Where is it now? The aliens retrieved it and then scolded me. 1990, June, 12 years old. My mom decided to move out of state for work after she got laid off at her job. It was a sudden life upheaval, but I was not sorry to leave that school since I was being bullied. I told my best friend about the implant just before I moved away. She said it was probably aliens, but the upside was they wouldn't know I moved house since the implant was still in the carpet. We had never really talked about aliens, but right away she thought they were jerks for scaring me and leaving something in my arm. The implant was still there, in the carpet, by my bedside table. I avoided vacuuming the spot and never looked for it again. Why? Because nobody wants to be the weird kid who got abducted by aliens. I wanted to be normal and forget about it, but a thought nagged at me. Would the aliens show up once I left and find some other kid in my room? When my room was all packed, my mom came in with a vacuum and started cleaning. She hovered over the area where the bedside table was. I told her not to because the implant was still somewhere in the carpet. She laughed and vacuumed it anyway. She said, "Now it's in the vacuum cleaner bag, and the aliens will just think you're wherever that ends up." We laughed about them thinking I had been dumped in a landfill. Honestly, that was the first time we could laugh about any of the strange stuff that happened in that house. We moved into my aunt's house for the summer and then to a town over 500 miles away. It was tricky finding a house because it was a resort area. The first place we stayed was a temporary rental. When school started, we moved into a house across town. In my aunt's house and the second house we stayed in, there was paranormal activity. Chairs rocked by themselves. Items got moved around. Doors opened and closed when we weren't home. We got a puppy and always shut her in the bathroom when we left the house. When we came back, the bathroom door and both bedroom doors would be open. Then there were phantom arms, cats, and even boxes. My mom thought it was just because I was becoming a teenage girl, and entities are attracted to that. Thanks, Mom. At the time, we made zero correlation between the aliens and paranormal activity. It's been mentioned a few times, more recently by government investigators, so that's why I'm including it. The aliens found us, October 1990. I woke up from a dream of being abducted, as I was aware of hovering some inches above my bed as a force lowered me back down. My mind was full of a kind of transmission from the aliens. At no point did I see them. It was a moving stream of images melded with emotions and intention. I did not hear or perceive thoughts in any particular language. The communication happened in mere seconds. In brief, the aliens were upset because they had lost track of me. I was being scolded about removing the implant. At the end of the transmission, the aliens directly said in English, "You're being allowed to remember this part, so you don't do it again." Then the force let go of me and I collided with my bed. I was still physically connected to the aliens and their ship and could feel them suddenly accelerate up and away. I jumped up and ran into my mom's room and told her what happened. She had just woken up from the exact same experiences, being returned to her bed, receiving a transmission that was a scolding, so she wouldn't do it again, and then being rudely dropped on her bed. Here's the transmission in detail. Again, it took mere seconds. The aliens show me a kind of montage of how they had gone to find me at the house where I found the implant. They were shocked to find my mother and I were missing. They tracked the implant. Images of a landfill at night. Image of a black trash bag being opened, and I recognized the contents as stuff we had thrown away before moving from the house. Image of the vacuum bag being opened. Implant found amid tons of dust and strands of my hair. There was so much dust because my mom refused to change vacuum bags until they exploded. Now I can sense several strong emotions recorded in the transmission. I don't feel them full force. It's like a volume for emotion is dialed down. But I would describe it as if they were shutting bricks, thinking they had just found my cremated remains in a landfill. They ran tests and found out it wasn't me. This is actually blacked out, like a scene missing. They searched for me, racing against time. I saw flyover images of my aunt's house, then fly over the general area where we had moved, but apparently they didn't know where to go next. Somehow they located the new house, another blacked out portion, since they don't want me to know how. several strong emotions, including relief, anger, annoyance when they located me. Image of my new house, seen from the air at night. At the very end of this info dump, the emotion was dialed up a little stronger. They were baffled, unable to comprehend why I would ever remove the implant. It staggered them that we had left them to believe I was a trash bag in a landfill. Then shock that we had somehow evaded them. They could not trace our movements between my aunt's house and the new house, like they knew there was a residence in between, but they couldn't pinpoint it. Remember the short-term rental? It wasn't haunted. Not drawing conclusions, just adding that detail. Our behavior made no sense to them. We had angered them by outsmarting them. They didn't like it. The only English used was the sentence, "You're being allowed to remember this so you don't do it again," accompanied by being thrown onto the bed. My mother's transmission differed from mine slightly. The images and content were all the same except the emotion was dialed up, especially the frantic, searching part. She was made to feel guilty and ashamed. And there were more English phrases used, namely that she had put me in danger by going rogue. The implication was that they were protecting me in some way, and she had jeopardized that. So after I woke up to find myself being lowered into my bed while receiving an alien transmission, Thematic warned me to not remove any more implants and concluded with a nasty little shove back into my bed. I immediately got up and ran into my mother's room. She was already awake and reeling from the same experience. Same dream, same transmission, same shove onto her bed. Those aliens were mad. I guess if we find any more implants, we need to leave them in. That was the impression we both got, and were meant to get. Still buzzing from the encounter, but something felt off. We stayed up the rest of the night, talking and analyzing our recollections and impressions. Did the aliens really care about my well-being, or were they just angry about losing track of us? If my well-being mattered, why throw me roughly on the bed? If they wanted my mother's cooperation, why not explain what they were doing to us in the first place? My mother was able to sense much more anger from them, and the appeal to her motherly instincts felt manipulative. Her parents had often resorted to emotional blackmail and guilt trips. That's what it felt like to her. We agreed. The main point of the message was about them, their inconvenience, their annoyance at having to search for us. We had gotten off their map somehow. That's what made them mad. Besides, how exactly were we supposed to let aliens know we were going to move? If they wanted a dialogue, they could have asked. I was much more skeptical about aliens, wanting me to feel that I had done something wrong. Those jerks had put something in my arm, no explanation, and gotten testy because I took it out. It's like trying to guilt trip a lab rat out of trying to escape. My mother was more impacted by the strong emotions in her transmission. Eventually she began to doubt the truth of what they told her. If I was somehow in danger, why would they leave in vague how to prevent the same thing happening again? That's not how someone genuinely concerned would behave. Like a doctor would explain exactly why they are giving you medicine and what to expect. Because they want your cooperation in helping you get better. Neither of us could deny the end message. Them allowing us to remember sounded condescending and saying, "Don't do it again," while throwing both of us on our beds like rag dolls was definitely more like a threat. Just wanted to point out that transmissions were near identical in general content, but definitely tailored to appeal to our personalities. I think they tried to hook my strongest traits, curiosity and empathy. They wanted me to feel sorry for their implied emotional pain. There wasn't any, but they were scrambling to find us, and they wanted me to be amazed by the aerial views and curious about their process of navigation. I'm a Star Trek fan. Of course, the seamless navigation was appealing. My mother has a bit less empathy. It's gotten better since then, and her main hooks are concern about me and avoiding feelings of shame, like her mother used to barrage her with. Also, for her to respond to an emotional appeal, that emotion better be operatic. And there you have it, folks. Every time you remove an implant, the aliens scramble to find you, and then try to emotionally manipulate you into not doing it again. They won't tell you why, at least not the real reason, and they don't know what vacuum cleaner bags are. To be extra clear, at no point did I see a spacecraft, internal or external, or alien beings. The visuals I saw were from the point of view of someone else. Also, I never found another implant. I have chronic back problems, so I have had plenty of x-rays and MRIs, plus a full CAT scan in late teens. Nothing out of the ordinary showed up. And it's about that time. Time to be woefully out of time. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again right here next week. God bless you.